Call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. All board members are present with the exception of Mark, who went home sick. First up is review and approval of the October 24th public meeting minutes.
Oh, on this one.
Motion to approve the October 24th public meeting.
I have one quick question. Where it says 100K, oh no, a market adjustment for the position of speech pathologist. Was it just one pathologist or was it multiple?
Two.
So it should have an S.
Yeah.
What? Where
It's in
are
the
you?
business
Kind of
administrator
sort of-
report, the last line.
Okay.
On the first paragraph of the business administrator report, the last line.
Oh, actually, I'll write out 100,000 too, sorry.
Yeah, but it's speech pathologists.
Yep, and I'll write out. Okay.
I will update my motion to say as amended.
Anything else? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Next up, November 2nd, meeting minutes.
Motion to approve the November 2nd public meeting minutes. Second.
Anything else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Any public communication and correspondence? Anyone? Okay, we did, get an email from Ken Folsom, the town administrator from Canterbury, I think you were on it.
Yes.
I was as well.
When did it come?
So
You're
it was
not on it.
Thursday. So he sent it to just the Canterbury School Board members, asking if we would like to attend their advisory budget committee on December 4th to discuss the 2024 budget. I didn't realize that you weren't on it.
Yeah, I thought you were on it too. It's a public meeting, it'll be broadcast if we can attend in person. I am traveling, so I know I am not available, but we had talked about one of us or somebody could go to their meeting as well. I'll be happy to attend.
I have a conference, so I can't go.
I will be there. So, Michael, I'll forward this to you.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's what I get for assuming, so. Anything else, public comment? Okay. Report, student representatives. Kate McDonald is gonna be about 10 minutes late, so BMS is reporting, both of you?
Yep.
Excellent.
Right, so we're just gonna go over a quick overview of what's happening in Belmont Middle School currently. Fifth graders are starting to prepare for Camp Cody with a fundraiser selling calendars. All proceeds are going to their Camp Cody trip, and they're currently carving pumpkins. Well, they did for Halloween, and that was one of their projects. And in sixth grade, they're doing experiments about the density of different objects.
For seventh grade, they're doing their science presentation on energy, and then in social studies, they're doing their 13 colonies presentation. And for eighth grade, we're doing our school start time surveys.
Any results from that today? You said you were getting them today?
We started looking at the results today, but so far we haven't dug into it a whole lot yet.
Can you say more about the school start time survey?
Basically, every student made an individual survey about what students and teachers around the school think the school start time should be, and are doing data on that, just to see, like, the amount of school that the amount of sleep that students get, what they feel the school start time should be, and just things like that to see what everyone's opinion is.
Okay.
So it's a little elaborate, it's tied into, I believe, a persuasive writing essay. I don't know if you remember years ago, a comment came to the board that I was doing away with chocolate milk, which is not true. So I should have warned you that they're doing.
That was fine.
Great. And recently, our school started a newspaper. Feel free to pass it around. It's called the Bulldog Spark. Talking about what is happening in the school and different presentations and all of that.
And this is a club?
Yes, I believe so.
I think it got posted to like Instagram or.
Yeah,
other
I think I
places.
saw it today.
Saw it on the Facebook.
Absolutely love reading it.
Yeah. How often is it published?
Once a month.
Once a month.
Yep. This is the second one out.
I thought I saw it.
And then we have our 30th annual Global Wobble coming up soon, either this week or next week.
Yeah, it started today, I believe. Yeah. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade just had a Halloween dance that was sponsored by NGHS. It was a fundraiser and collected canned goods, and the holiday dance is coming up. And for athletics, winter signups have just started, and sports are going to start after Thanksgiving break.
Any additional questions?
What is a gobble wobble?
It is a food drive that Belmont Middle School does every year, where we collect canned goods. In the past, we have collected thousands of pounds of canned foods to give away to local food collectors. We do it every year, and we have a presentation afterwards presenting the amount of pounds of food that we have collected and doing basically just a couple of games to celebrate.
So why would someone ask Miss Bubbles if they should be a turkey for the gobble wobble?
For one of our presentation, we have the turkey trot, and one person from each class is the turkey, and it's like a mini parade, and whoever has the best turkey costume wins.
And the golf.
And golf.
A very spirited competition.
You know, I always thought it was like a 5K based on what I was seeing, and then, so that's why I got.
How long's that competition been in place? Looking at Mr. Cole.
Well, we've been doing the Global Wobble, like I said, for 30 years.
Yeah.
But the call has been in place for a long time. We've kind of, the last maybe 10 years, the trot, turkey trot, we go up on the field and we do a walk, run, or wobble, I guess is what you'd call it. So.
Thank you.
Okay. I apologize for being late. I get out of work right before 6, so I'm here as soon as I can. As part of my last board report, I talked a little bit about how I would be providing some more information to the board regarding student perspective for our competency-based grading. I have moved forward with my plan to gain a broader understanding of how grading practices affect both BHS students and teachers. I am planning to meet with teachers during their department's PWT, which is their professional work time. That happens during our TLTs at the high school. So I have put together a list of questions which they'll have access to prior to the meeting. And I have sent Mr. Finch an email that he can forward to the teachers that has a little brief blurb about what I'm going to be talking to them about, and then those list of questions. So hopefully that will be going out soon, and I will be able to get started on that. I'm also planning to gather student opinions using a similar set of questions that I have written, and the discussions through a couple of different environments. I haven't planned out specifically what that's going to look like yet, but my hope is to sort of put it out there to students through the announcements, a couple posters, emails, just word of mouth to see who's interested. And then from that, hopefully we'll be able to set up a time to do a focus group, but also just for anyone who's interested, they have a little bit of feedback that they want to share verbally or through an email. Anything like that is information that I would be happy to have. So I'm hoping to have at least some of that compiled for you for either my next board report or the one after. In other news, students at BHS have had the opportunity to go on several field trips in the past couple of weeks, including to Body Worlds and FBLA conference and various career-oriented trips. A lot of those trips are collaboration between different classes at our school, which is awesome because it lets more students go on those trips. FBLA hosted, which is our Future Business Leaders of America group, hosted Holiday Fair this past weekend on November 11th, which was a huge success. It always is. A lot of work goes into it, and they did a really great job. It's also a great fundraising opportunity for our various clubs and the classes themselves. The senior class held a volleyball tournament prior to the French Club's annual Halloween dance that happened a couple weeks ago, which was I wasn't able to attend, but I heard that it was a lot of fun. Our fall sports have wrapped up. The boys soccer team finished 8-7-1. The girls also finished 8-7-1. Volleyball finished 11-4. Football 4-5, and the cross country and golf teams also had very successful seasons. So we're now moving into our winter sports. 4 students from BHS will be auditioning for the New Hampshire Music All-State Festival, which is this Saturday, November 18th. This is a very difficult selection process, and these students have worked really hard to prepare for the past since June, pretty much. We've also had some students selected from our high school bands to participate in the All New England Band Festival, which is held at PSU, and that is next Monday. And we've also had students selected to participate in our GSI Music Festival, which is this year held in Goffstown, and that's in January. Belmont High School also inducted many new members into its National Honor Society and National English Honor Society, and those ceremonies happen on November 8th. And then the last thing I have, which Mr. Finch is going to talk a little bit about as well, is that thanks to the class of 2022, the BH gym doors now have a new look. Mr. Silly, Mr. Finch, and a couple of students worked with Sinorama to complete the project. The doors have been covered with vinyl to celebrate our athletes and our new mascot. Are there any questions I can answer? That's all.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, we have in our packets PTO. I don't know if anyone from the PTO is here. No? Okay. So BEST PTO has a report, and so does EMS. So I don't know if we can acknowledge the reports.
I had a question for the middle school, but I couldn't email them. I was gonna ask them, they said they wanted to get more parents involved. As the parent of a middle schooler, I know they don't want us involved. So I always look for opportunities, so I was wondering what kind of ideas they had.
You know of anything? Or?
Yeah, so we just had our nominations, so we have all new officers and things like that. So hopefully our volunteer coordinator, and you'll be seeing some information from them pretty soon. We do have a dance coming up, which I'm sure they're looking for some chaperones and things like that. I'm sure your son would love to have you.
He doesn't even attend. I wouldn't even mind.
All right. Principals reports. First up is Chubb. She also provided, per our request, some of the information related to math in all the grades. Well, I should say the math the STAR screening data. People have questions for Anne?
Based on the math scores or percentages that you gave us, when were those tests taken?
September.
Okay. So I did break out some of the, based on the October numbers for student enrollment that we had at CES, I kind of broke out some of the numbers, and it didn't 100% add up to like a whole student, except for in the 3rd grade where there's only 10 students in that class, so that broke out pretty well. It looks like some of the ones, it's like 6.5 students at or above for the 2nd grade. I was just wondering if you could maybe explain how some of that worked out, because it looks like some of them, it's not adding up to whole students essentially.
So I'm not certain why that's the case, because for me, it breaks it down by student.
Okay.
So obviously I didn't share that data in my report, but if I pull up 2nd grade at or above benchmark, it lists 6 specific students.
Okay.
And then for on watch, it lists 5 specific students and so on.
Okay.
Does it round up? Cause like I can see, like I'm looking at 5 now and it comes to 101%.
Right.
Is that what the issue is? Does it?
Well, I'm looking at the 2nd grade, and I can see that at the time this data was pulled, they had completed assessments for 18 students, and there's 20 enrolled in the class.
Okay.
So it could be that 2 of the students were still completing their assessment at the time this was pulled.
Okay. That would make sense since I did my calculations.
But it doesn't do any rounding or anything like that, that I know of.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Belmont Elementary, Mr. Hill. Well, congratulations for not being on the additional targeted support and improvement list. That's huge.
Good effort by those kids.
Yeah. And staff,
Yep.
so. Anyone has questions?
You said that last year you set a goal to complete 500 classroom visits. Did you do 500?
I did, so June 9th or something, I think. Close. I just set that personal goal for myself because I felt like other things were taking me away from the classroom, and I wanted to get back into the classroom, so it makes me smile more too.
Yeah.
The piece about 80% of our students are entering kindergarten without important pre-academic skills. Did you look at how many kids are coming into kindergarten with preschool experience? Like, are these kids coming in with preschool and it's just not enough? Or are these kids not going to preschool? Is that been considered?
We haven't looked at that in depth, but I haven't even had time to look at the skills in depth that they're missing, but we have in the past looked at our.
But that's part of your questionnaire when they get screened in kindergarten screening? I would just be curious where they are before they enter.
With the dyslexia screeners, what are we using for a secondary assessment for those who don't meet benchmark?
We have a series of assessments that we're using, the reading specialists. So the past is one of them, the reading, sorry, the spelling, there's several of them that.
So you're,
yeah.
okay, that's. And then I noted you are looking at possibly an additional Title I teacher. Would that be to support, like, any learning plans that would need to come out of? And we have, when I say we have money for it, let me define that. Do we have money in our Title, I know it would come out of Title I,
Yeah.
but what are we using that money for now?
Well, our allocation went up a little bit this year, but there are several things that go into it. There are some supplies, some
Okay.
printed materials, our current staff. We had some part-time positions that were filled in the past. We had retired teachers that were working, which was
Okay.
nice, and some of them have just decided to fully retire, so that frees
Okay,
up some.
so there'd be, I mean, so we would be able to, and it would be a teacher position?
I'd like it to be a teacher position, yeah. Debbie and I will work that out, right, Debbie?
I'll be in the mix somehow, somewhere.
And are you doing screening? I mean, I know you're doing screening, cause.
Yes, that's a statewide expectation, so we're following the same process as Belmont Elementary. Because we don't have the Title I staff, we're a little bit behind them in our process, but we are following the same protocols.
Are you using Dibbles 8 though?
We are using Dibbles, yes, and we've been using that for multiple years. What we did this year was we added third grade as expected under the law. But we've been using that same process.
And do you have the secondary assessments you need? Cause with Title I, you may have those assessments, but do you have what
Right.
you need?
So, Ben and Silas and I have been in conversation about coordinating across the schools to ensure consistency. Dibbles is our main piece, so sometimes we will provide a dibble to a student again. We also have the STAR reading and other more minor assessments that we can pull from.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Pope. Belmont Middle School report. Anyone have questions for Mr. Pope? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pope. Love to see the pictures.
Yes.
Just, I mean, others had pictures too, so it's not. Okay, Mr. Finch. For those of you who wanted to see what the new doors look like, it's in here.
All right.
But, anything you wanted to say, or if we have questions?
A lot of great stuff. I know the board would like to see some Q1 data. I alluded in here to the fact that it came to a close last week. Today was the eligibility check that was run. So my next board report will include more of that disaggregated data and by, I want to present it by year of graduation in addition to just overall, data, as well as the numbers of folks who ended up on each of the tiers of ineligibility. So you'll be seeing that in my next board report.
Thank you. Any questions?
I had a question on
Sure.
the NEAS information.
Mhm.
So I looked at the letter and the areas that it's still suggested to stay on warning for. And then I pulled up the standards. I can only find the 2020 standards for accreditation on their website. But what areas are we needing to improve?
Yeah.
So they provide a multiple things, and a lot of it seems pretty basic.
Yeah, we're in a really interesting spot. So, as I alluded to in the paragraph in my board report, we worked with Francis Kennedy is his name. He's our actual NEAS liaison. And the process over my 5 years here has been creating some reports and recognizing the growth that we've taken, but also we were behind a couple of reports that hadn't been submitted. So when I took the position, we should have actually submitted a special progress report as well as a 2-year, just kind of, after the decennial visit, just kind of a standard update in terms of where things were in terms of addressing some of the recommendations. Since all of those things have taken place, NEASC has completely rewritten and revamped all of their standards. So their whole approach is very different. So what you're probably it's really weird, because if you look at some of our reports and some of the things that they're recommending, they don't even match what the new standards are anymore, because all of the recommendations they had were to the previous set of standards. In that meeting with Francis, we basically said, look, that we stop looking back, we're just trying to look forward and address all the standards that you want us to be looking at. Our next decennial visit is in 2027, so can we be looking for updating and addressing the curriculum standards that we will be working toward meeting for the 2027 visit, rather than, what was 6 years ago, which aren't even in those standards anymore. Some of the things were a centralized housing location, a common template, things like that just didn't exist. The high school is working very hard. I know Kate, has supplied some of her questions, and those questions and Kate's request to go to departments is on the faculty council agenda for tomorrow afternoon, so they can take a look at it before it goes out to all the teachers. But that's honestly what we're working on right now. Silas is very heavily involved in that too. We are looking at a Belmont High School specific policy IKA in terms of just kind of structuring what that would potentially look like, so that we have an end goal in mind. Right now, some of the things that we're trying to address, we've said and heard the word inconsistency a number of times, and there isn't an end goal right now. There isn't a policy that states exactly what some of those things should be. So we're trying to create one to be able to bring back to district support team. Again, it's a big task for tomorrow afternoon. So I know it's a weird series of responses to what seemed to be a simple question, but it's because we're at this weird kind of evolution stage, because we're moving from recommendations that were made that stand for standards that no longer exist for a decennial visit that's happening in 3 years, and trying to work on policy language to get there. So there's a lot.
Did that help, Randy?
Maybe. I would reserve my right to ask again at a later date.
Sure.
And is that the whole alternative special progress
Correct.
report? So it's gonna have the 2023 standards for accreditation?
Yeah.
So it's gonna be more the moving forward?
What we're doing to move forward, not what we're doing to address things that for 10 years, or almost 10 years ago at this point. We were fortunate to be able to do that, so we didn't have to look backwards and forwards at the same time. We could just move forward.
I mean, your question was, what didn't we do, right?
Right, so like one of them is like educators examine evidence of student learning and well-being to improve curriculum, instruction, assessment practices, programs, and services. So when I go to that section on the website, and again, it's the 2021, so it's not the 2023, it's, they have a list of things that
Right.
you're supposed to do, so I was wondering what.
We have literally never done any reports that align with the 2023 standards that are listed there, that we've never been asked to. The standards that we were responding to no longer exist. It's been restructured.
Other questions for Mr. Finch? Seeing none. Silas.
It's
question. Is there any, did you do I should know this. Didn't last year you do like an executive summary for us? Like, let me put it this way, I'll ask the question. What do you see? What are the highlights based on what you see?
That's a great question. So I like to focus on the longitudinal data that's right up front, because what that shows us is one cohort of students traveling through the grade levels. And so it's encouraging to see all of those classes moving up as they go in their average scale scores. The flip side of that is for both ELA and math, you kind of see a pattern that our average scale score is almost following about a year behind the proficiency cutoffs. So that means, on average, our students are scoring on this test about a year behind. So you see that in both ELA and math. Some big gains in math, though. Looking on page 6, both following the cohorts year to year and also looking, so if you follow like the class of 2029, straight across the row, you'll see grade 4, 5, 6. Obviously, there's some good growth there. But you can also see grade 4, if you kind of follow diagonally, since the year with no testing due to the pandemic, we're also seeing some improvement there in most groups. I think from this level, really pretty zoomed out, looking at whole classes worth of students and this one measure, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about, that our students are making gains. There's a lot that we want to dig in, and teachers and teams and schools are going through this process of, all right, so aside from that one overall proficiency level, how can we dig in and find out more about what our students need? So while it's not included here just because logistically it's not feasible, we do get more information than this from the state testing that is a little more useful to us. So for example, we can see some subpopulations, such as boys, girls, free and reduced lunch or not, students with an IEP or 504 or not. So we get some of that from the state that we can drill down deeper. We also can see for a group or for an individual student on ELA what within that whole big umbrella is a strength versus something that needs some improvement. So it breaks down into informational reading versus literary text, the writing piece, vocabulary, and some of the more specific reading foundational skills. So it's what you see here is really just kind of the overall status, a bit of a report card, but we can drill down deeper to get some information that's more useful in terms of responding, adapting our instruction, and making sure that we're meeting students' needs.
I have a question. So for the high school, I'm looking at the math results right now. It's the Shaker average versus the New Hampshire benchmark. That's a pretty downward trend. Is there something specific that you would attribute to that we are working on fixing? Or, because I would guess there would be perhaps, we had that lack of math teachers, but I'm not sure what else might be going on.
Yeah, so that's not what we want to see, obviously. And it's a concern, you know, you can see a bit of a pattern statewide, although Belmont High School is, you know, lower than the New Hampshire average. So we're really looking at math as a K-12. What we're trying to establish is, in our K-12 math instruction, is there common language that all teachers and students are using and will be familiar with? Is there a coherent progression of skills, meaning there's, we're building on knowledge and understanding, and some consistent approaches to instruction. So that we're in year 3 at the elementary level. This is kind of year 2 for both the middle school and the high school, but it just looks a little bit different because they're, you know, specialized math teachers. So we're doing lots of, you know, research and PD with math teachers, focusing on really building up students' conceptual understanding more than following procedures. So that's how we're tackling that, and I expect that we will see the kind of rebound this year, in part because we've got that K-12 alignment underway, you know, sort of picking up steam. So that means that as students are entering the high school, they've got some more of that background and they're building some of that common knowledge and getting used to that different approach to instruction. So I'm optimistic that we'll see some of those results bounce up a little bit. But yeah, in terms of why that's happening, specifically like digging into this, hasn't been much of the focus so far. It's been more about how are we getting students to think and talk about math and really grapple with the concepts.
I mean, I brought up pages 23, 24, is that what you're talking about? So like, yeah, I mean, I guess looking at it overall, holistically, I thought the scores were better than I anticipated, except for that section. Like, it felt like the middle school scores were consistent with the state, maybe above the state, and then there's, like, the high school just dropped right off. So like, as far as moving forward or concerned, that would be my biggest one moving forward, and I don't think there's anything we can gather until we do that next round of testing.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying as far as why you would expect to see a rebound.
How's our opt-out rate? I'm just curious, like at the high school, what's our opt-out on SATs?
It'll take me a minute to
No,
find out.
I just,
I don't know off the top of my head.
are we
well,
dealing with high numbers for across elementary, middle?
I think
It
it's,
seems high to me.
yeah, because I want to say the group for BHS for SAT was 60, which is quite significantly fewer than in that class.
Well, and most colleges right now don't require SATs, they're optional. So for students going to college, those would traditionally be your big chunk of students taking the SATs, and that's not necessarily the case now, so that probably plays into it.
Right, that's why I asked the question, because we can't assume that even the 3 to 8 data is for the, like, you wouldn't be able to do a match, like, there's 100 kids in the class, doesn't mean 100 kiddos took the test, because New Hampshire allows families to opt out of testing, but federally, there's no such thing as an opt-out, so.
I would say at the middle school, I don't have a number off the top of my head, but the most I've seen this last school year for opting out.
Why would parents opt their students out?
There's a lot of reasons, I
Yeah,
would
there-
imagine. And we have to be careful because there's also an attendance piece to the, to meeting the requirement to the state. Not only is there a academic portion of it, you have to have a certain attendance rate taking the test, but you can't prevent people from opting out.
Right.
I would be curious to know if the data from the high school has anything to do with the fact that, our classes they run by semester, so a lot of times kids have math for maybe half the year, or maybe they have a whole year off. I don't know when that schedule changed, because I know that hasn't always been the case. So I don't know if that has any effect on the data, but like I know for me personally, when I took the SATs, I hadn't taken a math class for a year, so that certainly played into my score. But especially with COVID, I feel like that data would probably be really hard to match up.
Other question? Seems like we should have more questions, so just,
I appreciated doing this together versus individually last year. So when I looked at everything as a whole, I know last year I had a lot of questions because we looked at it on an individual level. Still doesn't give me warm and fuzzies, just makes me concerned about the rest of the state too. But I did appreciate doing it at this point in the year, having all the data together. So thank you.
and it'll be interesting to see, because I know you mentioned, but if I look at, wait, what page am I on? 7, most things seem consistent, but the math for last year's 8th grade, which means this year's freshmen, so I'll be, quite honestly, very curious. I mean, that's 19% proficient or above, and the state was 40, like that's, I think, pretty significant. So I wonder what impact then that has potentially on where kids are at in their first semester at the high school, math-wise. So some of this is interesting to look, and I know this is one data point, I totally get that, it just.
And I think one of our goals as a district and in each of the schools is really focusing on what other data can we gather and how is that helping us. So, for example, we set the STAR testing for 3rd through 8th grade across all 3 schools, so that we have some of that common data.
Right.
But there's not any, normed or standardized testing happening at the high school to get that kind of picture of, okay, so this was a concern for those 8th graders, how are they doing in 9th grade? We don't have that in place right now, but it's something that we're talking about with the district data team, is having something that also crosses those transition lines.
Would we be able to look at like a pass, recovery, fail type for some of like the main major math classes at the high school?
The tough thing is you're comparing very different things. You're comparing a standardized state test to course failures and passing and things like. I think what Silas is saying is, right now the tough thing is we don't have anything that's continuous. Something like STAR testing isn't being continued through, so you can't continue to monitor what the student's progress is based on the same style of test and the same test makers. And the difficult thing with using something like STAR at the high school level then becomes, okay, so what's the selling point? How is it that we are going to utilize that, as a measure for students to really show us what they can do? Traditionally, the older students get in school, if there's no incentive behind it, the less they're going to put into it. I don't know. I would love to use that though, just so we can get as many data points as possible.
Anything else? Okay. board member reports. Randy?
Yeah, I'll go first. So, I know I emailed you all that the study reports are available. I've been asked to attend the next Canterbury Selectmen's meeting. I think there's been some questions and they're a little confused, just to kind of talk to them about it and what happens next. As of right before I got here, neither the majority or minorities have gotten confirmation that the reports are in good order and that they will be on the December agenda yet, but we're all still targeting that date to be available.
Sean?
Nothing.
I attended the National Honor Society and the English Honor Society, and it was nice. I didn't know that it hadn't been in existence in, a few years, so it was nice that that was back up and running.
Okay. Next up, Michael.
Thank you. Just going to give the board an update on the action plan that was presented to all of you regarding just continuing the conversation around competency-based grade and reporting. Based on that action plan, I'm just sort of going to go through and give you a brief update as to where we are. The action item of developing a portrait of a learner and strategic planning, as you see going through the budget, put monies in there to have someone help facilitate that work. And that is a multi-year process in general. As for the portrait of a learner, we are fortunate if you look at our current strategic direction. I should say our strategic direction has been developed in the past that expired in '22. There are learner outcomes for all of those areas within that strategic direction, so we're in a good spot in sort of refreshing that. Increased professional development opportunities. That's a project that's ongoing. Basically, we're trying to really find additional time for professional development. I know that Mr. Hill's put in his report and so forth, but it is tough to find additional time for professional development. That being said, it is ongoing. We're trying to have professional development embedded in contract hours at this point, particularly around competency-based grade and reporting. So it's an ongoing process. The review and revitalize proficiency scales, that's currently happening. Survey new staff members, we haven't developed a tool for what that would be. Just from general comments that we received is that our new staff members do have a knowledge base when it comes to competency-based grade and reporting. As for how in-depth that is, we don't have a survey in place for that at this point. Restructure new teacher orientation, that's just a logistical piece. We're gonna, instead of a one-day new teacher orientation that tends to happen the first day before all staff come back, we're gonna have 2 days. The first day is gonna be dedicated to competency-based teaching and learning, and the second day will be more of the items that we address in the future with our standard new teacher orientation. So we're gonna dedicate another full day, adding a day, I should say, to what was once just a one-day new teacher orientation. Establishing the baseline knowledge of competency-based education. We did go through the process of soliciting feedback with our staff through staff meetings in October. Those were facilitated by our teacher leaders that are in the building. We have all that feedback. We talked about condensing that data at a district level. We did that at our last district support team meeting. And again, the common themes that we see even on what we talk about as school board concerns is communication, really trying to, we have to bring back to life the communication that we've done in the past around why we are utilizing competency-based teaching and learning. Because when we thought about it, those families that were part of that initial communication piece are graduating out. So we have new families that are coming in that never got that opportunity when we really did that big public relations push when we moved into the system. So we have to bring that back to life because those families are moving out of the system, graduating, I should say. Still residents, but are moving out of the system. So we got to get an understanding as to how we're going to do that communication piece again. Other was PD, which we've already talked about. The other was Empower. Clearly a concern for Empower, and we're already in conversations with Alma to see what their capabilities are as a learning management system. It looks promising, and if we were able to go to one platform and just utilize Alma, that would be, I think that's really gonna be helpful. So we've started out, we met with representatives from Alma last month, and we'll be bringing them back. I asked for the building principals as well as the teacher representatives at district support team to get feedback from the staff. What are what we're calling the pain points with the learning management system, and also what's the wish list. So then we'll bring Alma back in and say how can you address these pain points with your system, and can you adapt your system to our wish list? And then at that point, we'll just continue the conversation moving forward, but we're hopeful. I think that's gonna be a big piece moving forward. And then policy IKA. This is already in the mix right now, just as Mr. Finch alluded to. Coming out of our last district support team meeting, we had decided, based on the feedback that we received from the staff, we're gonna start with the high school, developing a proposed grading scale, and then look at a tiered grading system, because clearly grading looks different at the elementary school than it does at the high school. But we're gonna start with the end goal of basically what are we looking at for a grading scale at the high school, and then feed the other grading scales into the high school. So it's a transition from elementary to middle and high. So it's not gonna be a grading scale that's for K to 12. It will be basically tiered, elementary, middle, and high. But we're gonna start with high school. That information is gonna go back to the district support team, and we will discuss to see how we're gonna move that through the rest of our shared leadership model. And then eventually bring a proposal to the internal policy committee for any type of change to the policy. And then from there, that's where the board would potentially take action. And we're really looking forward to getting Kate's feedback from the high school for the students. And then the, Empower Access information letter. That went out with an update to my families 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And we had 30 people that requested logins. So that's the action plan. So we're moving forward. We feel very hopeful and very promising, particularly the conversations we're having with our staff right now, and looking forward to feedback from the students.
Question for Michael.
Question. Talked about ALMA a little bit, and I know meeting with principals and the teacher leaders, I think is what I wrote down as what you gave. I think that's good, but I'm concerned about the other, I don't know, 90% of the teachers who are gonna have feedback. How early is the full gamut of teachers involved if we're looking at a different piece of software? Because I'm concerned in any situation where it's potentially a small percentage of people making a decision for the wider group. And I know the idea is, well, these teacher leaders will relay or pass down the information they have. But we're putting a lot of hope in that process actually happening. So I just don't want to get into a situation where we think the way to go is this way, but then we have a percentage of people that are unhappy because why didn't anybody think of this? Because they didn't have a chance to chime in, or didn't even know to chime in because they didn't know enough about the product to have that question.
I think it's all part of the process. We want to make sure people have an understanding as to why we might be moving in that direction. From the feedback that we've received from all the stakeholders that have provided feedback at this point, it's definitely a direction people want to move into. So you already have that momentum of people wanting. There will be some, I believe, at the elementary level that might not be as happy with that if we move away from Empower. But overall, in general, I think think that the momentum is there to really look at Alma and its capabilities. It's a common thread, it's very clear throughout all the feedback, and I bet we're gonna see it
I
through
just feel like
students as
if
well.
Alma's gonna give a presentation, at some point before a final decision is made, that presentation should go to any faculty that wanna be involved. If they don't wanna be involved, they don't show up, then that's on them, but I'd hate to have, people after the fact complaining, feeling like they don't have a voice in it.
Can you record it?
Yeah, so I think our next step is to have Alma come back to the district support team, and then we'll have a plan, we'll form a plan at that point if we're gonna be moving forward. How do we get that communication out so people can have a say? And
That's an idea.
Yeah.
It's recorded. You share that, and people have an opportunity to watch it and think of their questions and relay those questions on.
Alma has presentations they send out. When we went to Alma, they send out videos, and we as a staff all watch them individually, but we can come back with questions, so they already have presentations laid out.
I believe Alma right now is in 50-plus school districts across the state. And clearly, with the state choosing Alma as their student information system, it's a direction for us to go. We always what we're questioning is, how does it operate as a learning management system? Because it is a student information system, and the two are very different.
Yeah, just my opinion, I don't know how it is as a learning management system. If it is, great, but I wouldn't put our eggs in that basket just because we're using it as an SIS.
Right. I'm hopeful that, so that's all of those action items, just to give you an update. The work is being done right now to address the concerns, and I feel like our shared leadership model and also getting student input is going to be key in making sure that any transition we do, like revising policy IKA, potentially moving to Alma for basically all of our needs, people will be involved in conversations in order to make a recommendation to the board for any changes that we might want to make. And they're good conversations that are happening right now.
Other questions for Michael? So right now, what I'm hearing you say is we stay, that you're moving forward with the action plan you proposed.
Yes.
And related to addressing the concerns, but keeping the 1 to 4 competency.
Yes, and looking at the feedback specifically, we did not gain any sense of an appetite to go back to a 100-point scale. It's a matter of basically revising our current grading scale, particularly at the high school level, to show, to have the ability to demonstrate a greater scale between the whole numbers, between a 3 and a 4, between a 2 and a 3, and so forth. So really just sort of expanding on the 4-point scale, with no sense of an appetite that we're gathering to go back to a different type of grading scale, like a 100-point scale.
But addressing the concerns.
Addressing the concerns, absolutely. Which one of the main concerns is that it's too much of a gap between those numbers, which leads to that confusion as to how well is my student doing.
I'm afraid to say this, but I'm just gonna say it. If somebody is concerned about sticking with the 4-point scale, even a revamped, expanded 4-point scale, they should speak soon, because I feel like we're going down that road.
Well, that's why I clarified so my.
I thank you for that.
Because I want to make sure for a board, I'll speak personally, I'm comfortable with going in that direction, but I want to make sure if people are not comfortable, we need to speak now and start talking about it so we can, because I don't want Michael to go way down the path.
So based on my recollection of the conversations we had around this, we were looking at 2 avenues. One was fixing what we had, and then the other one was using the strategic direction to gather the research and all of that to kind of go to a 100-point scale. But we haven't done anything with the strategic direction.
Yeah, there was another avenue, I mean, my recollection was if we wanted to do something else as a board, if it didn't have to be as part of a strategic direction. I'm not saying we need to do that, I'm just saying we hadn't, I agree with those 2 points, and then the other I heard was if people wanted more family feedback, if we wanted to go out and do it now before a strategic direction. So I just wanna take the pulse of where people are at.
I would also add, I thought there was a third group that just wanted to go back to the 100-point scale as well.
I would say from my student perspective currently, before I sort of dive into my further research, I don't think people are interested in 100-point scale. I think if the 4-point scale is fixed, then that's certainly my personal,
From students, you said?
yeah, I think for me personally, I definitely would like to see a fixed 4-point scale, but I think greater students would more likely agree with that than switching to 100. But I will have further details on that in the future.
So I guess I'm just getting, are we good with Michael and the district teams going down this road? Do we want to?
So I think the hard part is we're not gonna really know till we see. the
I agree,
result.
like, part of me is like.
I agree.
yeah.
However, like, I appreciate that we're going through and trying to fix everything. This, you know, as you were talking and I was thinking about it, like, this could be something that, you know, over the next couple of years, we're soliciting feedback and seeing how we're doing with the changes that we've implemented. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily gonna be a one-shot fixes-all.
Right.
But so I appreciate this go down and I support this wholeheartedly. But I don't know how I would really feel about it until we get to the end.
Don't worry, I'm not holding anyone to that. I just, I more want, like, if people had huge objections right now, then let's talk about them because.
Yeah, I mean, if 4 of us at the table said, we want a 100-point scale, and we're not budging from that, then you're going down a road that's, we're never going to get to the end of.
So me personally, if we can fix it, I'm fine with it, as long as it's fixed.
I would like, when we get to the point of providing the board with more information, that's when I think we need to have the community discussion like we did, whatever, 6, 8 years ago, whatever, where we get community involved, and if nobody shows up, nobody shows up. But there will be people, I think, that will wanna know, what's all this grading talk, what's it gonna be? They might walk out of there saying, I have a better hopefully, walk out of there thinking I have a better understanding of, you know, what it's gonna be.
And I think one of the things we really gotta keep in mind is sort of trust the process, particularly around policy making. That's why we do first readings and second readings on our policies. So then the internal policy committee is gonna get a revised, I'm confident that you're gonna get a revised policy IKA to review. That's something that we can communicate out, say this is a revision of a policy that impacts all students, it's the grading scale. Please come and provide your feedback prior to the second reading, which is when the board votes, or even for the first reading. So like we can communicate the importance of getting feedback on that one specific policy. That's where your community gets involved. So I think we trust the process of student input, staff input around revising that policy, get that information out to the community, so if they want to be engaged in that conversation, you're dealing with a policy. And that's why we have the first reading and the second reading. First reading, you take the feedback from the community, apply it to the draft policy at that point before the board votes on it. So just trust our process.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't wanna vote on a new or revised IKA until we've got all those groups covered.
Yeah. And that would be an email blast out of an important policy change that impacts all students. This meeting, you have the opportunity to express your thoughts and opinions to the board and see who shows.
Would you mind if I say something? You okay with that?
Jeff was gonna say something
I
first.
was just gonna say something.
I can't remember, I gotta go back and find it through the internet, but I saw a tech school that had 4-point scale, like you guys have here. But they also had like this little sidebar where they had like interpreted it for, I gotta go find it, cause I thought if it's done the way I'll get it to you.
Yeah.
But if it's done like that, and it explains exactly what it is, and it does have a 100-point scale, like relation to has everything there. And so, someone who grew up with a 100-point scale, I can look at it and then it translates over to
Yeah.
so parents can, it was really well done.
Basically, like a conversion, if you can find that, that'd be
And I'm not
great.
tech savvy,
And
so
we
I
actually
forgot to
do that.
benchmark it or hashtag, but I saw it done, and if it's done like that, then I have no problem with the 4-point scale, because it explained everything, this is what it was, and I'm fine with that, if it's well done, no problem.
And we currently have that at the high school where you have to take, you can speak to this, Mr. Finch, we have to take, basically transcripts coming in from students from out of district. But we transfer it over to
Or
a 4-point
VLAX.
scale or VLAX, so we currently do that, so we have something in place already. So it's a very good point.
And vice versa. Like if a Belmont student transfers elsewhere,
They have to.
they're leaving with a transcript of 4-point scale and they have to go the other
We're in
direction.
good shape.
Are you talking something like this, where it's got like 1 through 4,
Yeah.
A through
Exactly, I
F?
saw that, but it was on
I-
that's in tech school my daughter was looking at.
I would love to see it
Like
because
just a
Yeah.
if
crosswalk.
some of the, so speaking to have done, I've had to do this with my son. Different methods made it look like he had, quite frankly, an A in every single class. And it didn't make sense. I mean, I could only use that method, so I think if it's done well.
This was done very well, I mean, this was like.
Yeah, it's not, you can't just transfer numbers, like I know we have the
Yeah.
system, cause I've taken BLX classes,
Right.
and like,
Big
I don't like how it works.
Right.
Because all it does is just say this number equals this in our
Right.
system, and that doesn't accurately reflect your work, and it doesn't
Right.
match with the whole point of our system is not to do that.
Right, but I think we can see what's out there to mostly help parents and people understand.
I'm looking from a parent's point of view, okay, you have
That
3.5,
definitely makes sense.
and it wasn't
Yeah.
like an exact number, but it gave you a range, so I'm like, okay, you're between like an
Yeah.
80 and 90, all right. I mean, I'm not looking for a pinpoint, I want a general range.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, you know, I'm like, what's a 2.5? You know?
I just take all the numbers and I divide it by the number I added up and say, oh, your average is 3.2. That's a pretty good grade point average, you're fine. Again, I don't know the individual scores, how that
Yeah,
works.
but I was just, I thought it was well done, they
Yeah.
explained it, how it translates to the grades, and I was like, if it's done really well, then I have no problem.
Mr. Finch, you wanted to add something?
No, I just was gonna say, one of the difficult things is during these conversations at the board level, we have things that we need to fix at the building level. You know, consistency, it comes up all the time. So as we're, working through those things, the goal that we have is implementation of new scales by the 24-25 school year. And that's what we're working toward. Obviously, in the meantime, as those conversations are happening and adjustments are made, we would hope that professional practices continue to get more consistent as we move through the end of the year as well, that kind of second semester transition. But the goal that we have right now, just to have in the back of your heads as you're talking about timelines and things like that, is we're working toward that for the beginning of next school year to address the concerns that have been raised.
Probably getting ahead of ourselves, but the habits of work, is that still something that's being considered? Because there is a school of thought, it might be my school of thought, where I'm not sure I really care as much about the grades as I do the effort. If my kid's like doing great with all the effort scores, then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
Like there's a part of, I think there are some parents that feel that way, that, well, I don't know what a 3.5 means, but I know if they're getting all their assignments done on time and they're participating, then I gotta be happy with that.
Yeah, in my next board report, you'll see that reflected in one category of eligibility, where a student is not on even level 1, because yes, they are not academically passing the class as of the quarter 1 cutoff, but they are passing habits of work in that one class. That's our policy. So for a student to have any kind of impact whatsoever on eligibility, they have to not be passing a class and the habits of work in that class are also not passing. So there's some recognition of that. There's also been conversation, and there was actually, over the summer, there was some conversation that our first eligibility check of the year, and that's sports, extracurricular clubs, and it impacts a lot of students, would be only based on habits of work scores, because the collection of evidence is so early at that point, but certainly a student can go in there and demonstrate that they're working to their capacity. And that would work within NHIA policy as well, because all they allude to is the most recent grading quarter, and our first eligibility check is halfway through the first quarter. We do more checks than they require. But at the end of the day, at the end of that conversation, the faculty council recognized if we're gonna do this, then we need to get everybody on board, have a conversation with everybody. And so it's a consideration for next year, but it wasn't implemented for this year. So 100% that is still pursued. One of the things we need to work on, again, is consistency. So if we are going to do that, then we need to have a very consistent understanding of what habits of work means, and it should be equal between one class and another class.
Yeah.
I find a lot of students in my circle don't pay any attention to habits of work. One, because they're so inconsistent, and two, because they don't really have an impact on us. And I think that may just be my circle, and I think they perhaps have a bigger impact on other groups, but overall, I don't think anyone really pays attention to them right now.
I mean,
Yep.
the other thing I'll say is, it's in the weeds, but my frustration with the whole competency-based grading, competency-based education is you could have, in theory, students that don't make an effort right off the bat. And they eventually do better from a grading standpoint than the person that did their assignments on time and didn't get as high a score the first time and the only time they did it. And I think that's something that will have to be addressed as part of this whole process.
But what I'm hearing is that we're okay moving forward with, we're not moving forward with anything at the moment. Like, with the team moving in this direction. I think we additionally talked about some things tonight, so.
I appreciate the efforts in trying to fix what we have, and I think the communication and making sure that our parents are informed and understand what we are doing, and I'm happy to hear that we're at least looking at maybe going away from Empower and finding a different platform to use.
Yeah, anything you have, send it to Michael, Jeff in particular, because you brought it up.
Yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
I'll find it, yeah.
Okay, where are we? Michael, you're next.
So this is bring this up every year, policy EEAA, emergency superintendent succession. So basically, if something was to happen to me and I wasn't able to perform my job responsibilities, I have to have a primary and secondary administrator in place. So Debbie would be the primary administrator and Mr. Pope would be the secondary administrator. So this is just for information only, part of our policy. I have to bring this forward each year just so the board is aware.
Oh, it's information.
Yes, it's not an action item.
So we can recognize that.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, continuing business, budget development.
Mr. Kira. Yeah, if you want to stick around for this, Kira.
Okay.
But move on if you'd like to, but don't feel like you need to.
Stay as long as you want. She's like, I'm out of here.
Let's give it a-
Door.
We didn't get
the same offer.
Have a nice night.
So you all can come up or you can hang out back there, whatever you'd like. So one of the things, the focus for tonight is, we want people to, this is our time that we can ask Debbie or Michael items that we would like for data relating to the budget, so that we can have all the information in one spot or at one time to make some real decisions at the next budget meeting. So, if I can use your example, Sean.
Oh, yeah.
Sean provided an example, like he wants to know what the increases we've provided non-union staff over the last 5 years. So that's a data request that we can make here, so then the next time we meet, we have all the data that we want.
I realize it's not necessarily, like, when it came to administrators, maybe it was last year, I don't know. It wasn't like everybody got the same percentage, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yes.
So, I understand it's not gonna be perfect, but I wanna get an idea of, over the last 5 years, certain positions have gotten 10% increase or something, like, I wanna know that.
So I think we were trying to find a way to structure the discussions, but first, like, what information did we want? I believe do you have updates? I guess I should start there.
I do. So the health insurance rates came in at 9.1%. And when I was working on putting in everything for any adjustments, I realized that the formula that we used, we assumed 10% increase. And the formula only applied the 10% to the employer cost, not to the entire health insurance rate. So I don't have anything I can cut out of the budget. So, because we had budgeted 10 and it came in at 9.1. So there really isn't anything to cut out of the budget based on the new health insurance rates.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Okay.
Because what about that other 0.9%?
Yeah.
So the health insurance rates break down. We get the monthly rate, the district pays a portion, and the employee pays a portion.
Right.
The 10% was only applied to the employer portion, not the entire health insurance
So we're not gonna
plan.
see the savings in the
So,
budget.
right, in the budget, there's not gonna be a savings in the budget.
Do we
Because
have
of
to
how-
increase the numbers?
About $15,000 is what we're off.
Okay. So we
Like
need to add
higher.
We would need an additional 15,000 in the budget for the
I'm
health
like,
insurance.
there's gotta be
But
something.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure, we're gonna be able to absorb that as we have changes in plans. So I'm not worried about the 15,000.
But the budget's not going down after Debbie tells us.
Correct.
Sure.
That's right.
Okay. All right, any other updates from?
Just back to Sean's point, so that group that was non-represented voted to decertify or whatever, I remember from last year's discussion. So we're keeping an eye on in the budget that their pay increases are reasonable and commensurate with what the represented employees are getting, correct? Otherwise, you're gonna be in a situation where you may be enticed to unionize again.
I don't necessarily see there's gonna be any enticement to unionize again because of it's so few members originally, but I think the board has made a really strong effort over the past couple of years to bring the salaries up so that they are competitive.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I just didn't know about this year's budget, continuing that trend.
So this year, Michael was proposing a 4% increase for
4%.
support.
To the salary schedule.
Yeah.
And then they'll still get the step.
Yeah,
So
okay.
they will get, yeah.
Okay.
So I would like to see, and if this is available on the website, you can gladly point me to it and I will go get it myself. But the overall budget increase as a whole percentage for the last 7 years. So Sean, you had indicated that we had kept it pretty low.
Yeah, that's in the public hearing book, so.
Is that the same, is that what's in the FAQs?
Yep, yep. Yeah, and I think we go back more than 7 years, but I'll pull that information.
Just to clarify my actual request, was there something in here that was 5% this year?
The what we call non-affiliated, that was the group of people that have never been in the union. They didn't qualify for the union.
Okay.
So it's SAU support staff.
Yeah, so I guess to clarify, if there's a difference between, say, an administrator and another group and non-affiliated one,
Mhm.
if you could break each of those down.
Yeah, I was going to.
And we did adjustment, just for everybody, we did, what do we call them? Market adjustment, for both a couple of the non-affiliated
Yep.
staff as well as for a couple of administrators,
Mhm.
so
Correct.
I'm assuming that would all be in the
Yep.
package.
How has that worked out for retention and recruiting? I remember food services was quite the discussion last year.
The increase to the salary scale that the board made last year for our support staff has had a very nice impact on being able to recruit and retain support staff. And what we mentioned last year is that it was one step forward. We still weren't there. That's why we feel that the 4% on top of the salary scale will get us to where we need to be.
And I had wanted to see, which I know I'm not expecting you to have it now, like, do we know what the surrounding towns are doing with their support staff? Just so
My
we-
question.
Yeah.
That was my question too. What are
Just so
surrounding
we-
districts doing?
So we're hoping to have that for you on the 28th, which I think, I just want to plant the seed right now. I think the board meeting on the 28th should be we should dedicate that to a budget work session and minimize our items on that day.
I will not be here. I'll be in Minnesota. Right?
Okay.
Minnesota.
Way too warm, just should I say.
Not for fun, by the way.
But people went to Minnesota in January.
28th's not on.
Yeah, 28th wasn't
this
on there.
calendar.
Calendar.
It's because it's a normal board meeting.
Regular
No,
board
this
meeting.
is
There's not,
There's other board meetings.
There's like other regular board meetings.
next one is 12/5 and then 12/12.
Well, this says date and location of next meeting, November 28th at BES.
No, he's referring to
It's
the
just not on,
budget
it's just
Right.
not on the calendar that I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I think because last year it fell on Thanksgiving week, we didn't have it, that's why.
So there is one, 11/28.
It's up to the board as to whether you want to discuss the budget at that meeting.
But 11/28 is a regular
It's
board.
a
regular
meeting.
board
Where
meeting,
we would
yeah.
have typically the budget as part, like
Right.
tonight, basically.
Right.
Yeah, but on the 28th, if you look on the horizon, there's only like 2 things.
Right,
Yeah,
so
it's
that's.
a prime time here. I mean, once we get to that on the agenda, on the horizon, I have a couple things that we need to add to that, but they're not big items.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be
It would-
anywhere
it
as
would be
lengthy
here,
as our
yeah.
agenda this
Yeah.
evening.
All right.
I will also have track changes, those are due in 2 days. So I'll have the rest of that information, and I can put that in and have a default budget for the 28th as well.
Okay. My question was, could we have a default budget? Did you ask, or can you ask, if you haven't already, Jim about the transportation
Yep.
contract for default?
When did you figure out the state rate? You probably told me.
The state.
Well, when the state comes in.
So the state revenue should be coming in by Wednesday as well.
Okay.
Canterbury has not set their tax rate yet, so until they have set their tax rate, I'm not able to do any projections once I have the revenue. I'm sure it's gonna be set fairly soon, but
Belmont has set theirs?
Belmont got set last week.
When you say the tax rate, that allows you to say, in theory, this is what the tax would cost for.
Yeah, I look at the
250,000.
valuation, based on this year's valuation and this year's rate per thousand, this budget, based on this valuation, would be this impact.
Question?
I remember us at the last meeting talking about figuring out how much of the 7% increase was from, like, stuff we can't change. I don't remember specifically what.
So that's gonna be in the default budget, it's called a default budget,
Okay.
because it's the stuff we have to keep.
Okay, so then we'll see
regardless.
how much of the percentage we can change.
Yeah, it at least, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's hard to, I mean, I'll just speak personally, I liked the idea of like, what's the number? The problem is I don't know what we're contractually obligated to do, so I personally felt like I'd be picking a number with nothing to back it up. So I wanted to see the default to know, like, what are we contractually obligated to do? Which would just help me kind of wrap my head around what we have to do.
Is that default budget gonna come with what feeds it? I don't remember having that discussion last year.
Yeah, so what I do is I present the entire budget and I
Yeah.
look at, and so all the teacher salaries,
Yeah.
that's contractual obligation, so you have to carry that forward. one of the things that does not have to get carried forward is all of the other salary increases, because that's not under a CBA it hasn't been voted on by the voters.
But the CBA is a set pay if the person's retained. Again, I'm not advocating cutting staff, but.
Correct, it would
Okay.
assume that all of those positions are
Still
remaining,
remaining,
right, I
right.
mean, that's another discussion altogether,
Right,
but,
okay.
yeah, the default budget assumes all the positions are retained.
So with that default budget, maybe I missed it last year, does it, without getting the details on the staffing, but here's the staffing number, it says default, if the staff stays the same. Here's, transportation contracts are cut, so you have to obligate those, any bonds, whatever. Does it, can you break it down so you see each category? I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah,
last
it's
year.
line by line.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
presented, Jay, very similar to how we present the detailed budget for the proposed
Okay,
operating budget.
I just didn't remember that from
Yep.
last year.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
And then summarized in that other, so it's in both formats.
Right, okay.
We'll have that for you on the 28th.
I have some
Questions?
other questions, but I'm just gonna email them to you.
Okay.
What questions we have related to, obviously, the budget?
The last meeting, we talked about folks floating an idea where they'd like to try to land to help set the agenda. Do you want to see this other information before you all do that? Because that really helped guide the discussion last year.
Well, I personally.
Well, I thought about it, and I threw the number out, and then I thought about, I remember we have a teacher's contract and everything, so I don't know what percentage of that 7% we have, like, she said.
Right.
I've been thinking about it, and I'm like, I can't throw out a number this year, like I did last year.
But we can throw out a number, though, when we have,
More information.
Yeah,
We have more
when I know what I'm
information.
looking at, then
Right.
you're fine. I just don't know what I'm looking at, so.
The default's very helpful, because the board usually decides how close do you want to be with the default and proposed operating, so that's going to be very helpful for you.
open positions. I think that was another thing that came up last
Yeah.
week, if I'm remembering. What open positions do we have?
Fortunately, it's much smaller than last year.
Well, oh, that's great. I just, other questions?
I have a question for the, 4 new support staff. Were those the ones where the positions were cut last year?
No, last year, the cuts were general classroom assistant positions. These are one-on-one behavioral positions that are required for a student's IEP.
Okay.
And that would that go in the default budget?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a choice.
Right.
I know the board gets this on a monthly basis, but could we get an enrollment report for everybody as well?
Different than the November 1st. I think you want an updated.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever's the most,
Just so that
the latest one.
they all have it too, I think was
So
you
do
don't
you-
get the enrollment reports.
So do you want the November 1st enrollment report?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, we probably have it in our packets, right?
Yep.
But
It would also help me, and maybe it's just me, though I heard we talked about pre-K soccer in Canterbury, but I know we had the position for the teacher in Canterbury this year, right? So next year we need it because, I don't know, you don't have to answer that now. I just wanna make sure we're constantly looking at, do we need that additional teacher? Again, I know you talked about the
Well, those
pre-K.
classes are like 20, it's like you can put them in one, and
No, I'm not, I'm just saying when we're looking at positions that we added this year because we needed it, I wanna make sure we can say, we need it next year too. That's all I'm saying.
So I just did quick math, and the year two of the CBA, the 4 behavioral assistants, teacher, the health insurance increase, and the transportation, it comes to $1,094,999 of the 1.6. So.
Thanks, Randy.
No problem.
That's terrible.
I'm just saying, like.
That was.
Those are just those things.
So
Debbie,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
can we get an updated IT CIP? I think at the last meeting, we were saying we were taking out a couple of the $15,000 expenditures.
And I'm assuming buildings and grounds, we tossed some things to you. There'll be an update on what got tossed. I don't remember what it was, but didn't we ask? I should go back to Greta's notes.
We haven't gone through the budget from a building and grounds
Right.
perspective. We met tonight, but that was not part of the agenda. I agree we should do that next month.
So to your request, Sean, on the enrollment report, so your November 1st enrollment report is in this board packet, but I can make sure that the advisory
Yeah.
committee gets that.
It
unless you
it can
want me to bring
address,
copies for
in
everybody.
theory, like class sizes. What are the class sizes at, third grade or fourth grade or whatever? You might have to do a little bit of digging to understand the report, but.
On a macro level, I think the enrollment's relatively stable year to year, right? And I think the staffing's been relatively stable, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a slight decline, but not enough to have a significant impact on the district.
Any other?
So I have a question.
Yeah?
For the CIP. I went back to the budget, and I know it's not all furniture, but under furniture and equipment, we were looking at close to $100,000 increase.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't that be part of buildings and grounds in the CIP?
So the buildings and ground CIP is more with doing the structural kinds of repairs, not furniture. So that's not something that we've ever put in the buildings and ground CIP. That's something that is based on principals' requests.
Other than cafeteria tables.
Right, cafeteria tables would be the exception.
I mean, I'm just thinking that might be something we could look at adding to it.
Does that affect, we're talking about tax rates? I mean, does
Well,
it matter?
because we can plan for it. It seems like we keep cutting furniture and equipment and stuff that the schools are requesting.
Well, I think what we,
And-
I don't know if it was an action, but he brought this up and I fed off it or the other way around, was just kind of looking out the next 5 years, whatever. So if there's lumpy expenses coming, the board can make a decision.
Right.
You know, do I want to spend early? That may be too late in this budget cycle to do that, but I
Right.
think that's
And
kind of where you're
that's
coming
what
from.
the CIP
Right,
is
yeah.
correct.
I just remember last year, there's some good sized expenses, so, and
Yeah.
that'll happen, but.
I do think furniture is one of those things where like, oh, we gotta, the budget's a little high, we don't wanna affect students, we don't wanna affect teachers, it's a simple thing. Not
To
simple,
cut.
but it's a simpler thing to cut. And so, I think sometimes it does.
Well, I was thinking, not just furniture, you know, buildings, that's probably somewhat predictable.
Well,
You're gonna have some expenses based on past history, and I don't know that the board can see that far.
Well, we
down.
do in the CIP, I brought my wrong budget, so that's what Heidi's talking about, is in the CIP, we do.
Oh, it goes into the out years, okay.
See, it goes all the way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why we can't take more.
Yeah. Cause
I
25,
missed that
26 is gonna be
because I did.
expensive.
Right.
We're gonna fix the high school parking lot.
So Jay, it's it's fairly rare that we put in what I call the soft goods of the building
No, I
on
know.
CIPs. You know, anything, if you were to take your school and turn it upside down and shake it, everything that falls out are really your soft goods. The CIP is about the facility upgrades and the, you know, facilities and grounds upgrades that are major costs.
No, I understand that.
Yep.
I
So-
think Heidi's got a good point, though, there's these softer costs, they're real, they show up. So, maybe that's your point, you don't see it as the years progress, and yet we know we're gonna incur those expenses, so the board can decide when they wanna incur them, I guess is the point, right?
I also fear, as we're trying to, keep costs as low as possible, that when we can buy furniture, we're so worried about the cost, we don't necessarily even buy the best thing. And I don't wanna spend a crazy amount of money on furniture, but sometimes you get what you pay for too. So if you buy the cheapest chair you can get,
Yeah.
you're getting
Don't go to IKEA.
2 years out.
Do we have opportunity to create another trust fund for things like, we call it soft goods?
Yeah. Well, we do, and we're actually gonna be bringing that up when we start talking about warrant articles, because we feel like we need to develop a separate trust fund for kitchen equipment. Because the kitchen equipment, when it goes, it's costly. Like, we're looking at a new steamer table, it's like $30,000.
Well, we've got one item that's around 24,000 and another one that's 19.
And our equipment's old, so we're thinking about establishing a new trust fund this round for kitchen equipment specifically. So yes, you can really develop it for.
And that's one of the
Any
things,
reason
we're
you would-
developing an inventory of what we have for equipment, how old it is, and getting an estimate on the useful life, so we can have
For the
kind of a.
kitchen?
For the kitchen equipment, yeah.
Have
Well,
been
then you
able to
can go one
replace-
step further, by the way, and say, do I replace it and get a trade-in or sell it or something? I know school board's probably not in the business of selling equipment, but on the other hand, if it still has some useful life, sometimes it makes a decision. It's a better decision to get new stuff and
Right.
recoup some of that value.
I think some of the equipment's been replaced with grant money.
We
correct?
have gotten some things that we've been able to
But I'm
replace,
sure you
but
can't
it's
buy.
not the big stuff, it's not the big equipment that we need.
That trainer position, is the board comfortable that that's gonna be effective? I've struggled, I'm not arguing whether you do a trainer or not trainer, but with the way it was described, I'm not really clear how it covers
Which one?
what some of the concerns
Athletic
are.
trainer.
Well, they're two separate, because I know you had, I know there was discussion around the equipment and staffing the fitness room, which is separate from the trainer.
Right, but even the trainer, I was trying to get my head around, can we hire somebody? I guess this was the plan, when a sports team is practicing, there would be a trainer, and is it all sports teams, is it some sports teams? That's where I was kind of
Well,
struggling.
I
It's one
think
person, so I
historically,
don't know
when
what I
we've
just-
had one, it's based on location, like what's happening at the high school, for
Correct.
example. So if there's a cross-country, they're there for that, if there's a practice, they're around for that, but they drive around and cover multiple things at the site.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily like sport-specific.
And back when, well, not including last year, so previous years, they would have kids who were either injured or recovering, doing different strengthening activities.
Well, my only question was, you all know this better than me, I just trying to understand with what was described as the position and the pay, is it gonna cover what you're interested in having covered in terms of services? I couldn't get my head around that.
It's a good start. The Kevin Bellier, our athletic director, was looking for a full-time, which is there all day.
Uh-huh.
We're starting with getting somebody back on a more consistent basis every day, particularly in the afternoons.
And how about the resource officer? I never understood where that finally landed. There was a fellow from the Belmont Police Department, which was rather pricey. Is that where you landed, or?
No, we're very fortunate. We were able to hire a part-time SRO that's doing a great job. Started, I believe it was January
Okay.
of this year. He's part-time,
Well, you might wanna explain the part-time. It's like,
30-plus hours a week.
so it's
5 days a
when
week.
school's in session.
When school's in
Oh,
session.
okay.
Okay,
So
so I was
for.
gonna say, I'm
You
pretty
see
sure
him
he's
every
there
day.
all the time.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to.
He's there every day, just has a specific number of hours that he can
Right,
work
That
within a
makes
week.
sense.
Maybe
That makes a lot more
we'll
sense.
have that
Next year as well.
Next year, well.
It's in the budget.
Awesome.
Great, very good find, does a great job.
Heidi, do you have, I see you have a sheet of paper. Do you have questions?
Just one other question as far as revenue. How is the state at this point with reimbursement for the voc ed? I know that they never seem to quite really reimburse what they should be reimbursing, so is that still the trend?
Yes, they have not, they've continued to not reimburse everything they're supposed to be. It has not been as big a hit as the first year when nobody was expecting it, but we still have to pay additional every year. So I don't have the new figure yet. I don't get it until after, so based on last year, I'll get a bill probably in October.
Is it
November.
trending downward as far as the revenue portion of it?
No, I mean, it's kind of leveled off, so, you know, what we have in the budget has been sufficient to cover the current year tuition plus what the state hasn't funded.
That being said, Heidi, a new bill was passed that you can't put a cap on your tuition costs for voc ed. Any student that wants to go can go. But since I've been here, we've always made that work. Where I know there were caps in the past, but if a student wants to go to any of our regional CTE centers, we make it work. But now it's in the law that school
Does that
districts can't
start
cap
a certain
that
year
cost.
though? That's junior year?
Yes, it's still junior year.
Like freshmen can't start at
Junior, senior, because that's what the program is.
And is the majority Hewitt, or is there still Winnisquam?
Majority is
Concord
Hewitt.
Valley?
We have a few students that go to Winnisquam and a few students that go to Concord.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I anticipate we're gonna have more students that are gonna go to Winnisquam, particularly the two new programs that are gonna start running. One is cosmetology, which I think there's a big need in the region, so I anticipate we're gonna see some students there. The other one is, let's see, it's business manufacturing, which is gonna be another.
They used to
draw.
be pretty big in forestry and
Yeah, that's why it was called
agricultural.
Winnisquam Ag, it's not gonna be
Yeah.
called that anymore.
Huh?
Interesting. Other questions?
Debbie, could I don't know how you can do this, but can we get sort of a comparison budget-wise of sports versus the co-curricular type activities and clubs?
Yeah. Yeah, it is broken out, it's in two different functions. So-
Yeah, I was trying to go through.
Yep, the 1410 and the 1420
Okay.
are separate, yep.
But does that include, just on Heidi's piece, would that include like uniforms?
It's the
and-
1420, but that also includes Cayman, so, you
Right.
know, his salary and benefits. So, I mean, there's different ways I can break it out, but I'll work on analysis for you.
Thank you.
And the other thing I wanna let you know is we did upload all of the Appendix B job descriptions. They are now on the SAU website. If you go to the Human Resources tab and scroll way down, you'll see. So as we develop more job descriptions, they'll be uploaded there.
Thank you.
Getting to Heidi's question, does that that wouldn't include stipends though, right? That's a different part of the budget.
The co-curricular and,
Yeah,
yeah,
athletics.
it includes 1410 is the salary and benefits for the stipends, and the 1420s is the salary and benefits for the athletics.
Just one other question.
Yeah.
Why, I'm just curious, the high school lab is on the IT CIP?
It's the computers for the lab. It's,
Oh.
yeah, the computer lab.
Okay. I just said high school lab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not the science lab.
Are we able to see what furniture has been cut in recent past budgets? Or I don't know if we are able to find that out or not.
You wouldn't really see that because, part of the process, like Mr. Pope is asking for some furniture. I know it's a tight budget year, it won't make it in the proposed budget that I went forward. So it might have, we never even made it on the proposed budget that gets to the,
Okay,
gets to the
I was just
board,
wondering,
so
because
it's very-
we have a lot of furniture in here, and I know previously that's often what gets cut. So I would guess that we have some things in there that have been trying to get onto the budget for a while now, but they haven't made it. So those things, we were probably be tempted to cut, but I would say it's probably, they really need to be replaced, but we might not be able to see that based on what's in here.
What if we looked at furniture that was added to the budget in recent years? Would that be helpful to see, you know, what has been paid out?
I think maybe to some degree. Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
We've bought a lot of furniture and that's with ESSER funds. And the problem going forward is they may put in, you know, classroom furniture, but they're not detailing, is it chairs or desks or, you know, so then they would meet and say, okay, well, I can trim some out of there, but I don't really know what they're trimming out, because I don't have a list of what they're buying for furniture.
I also make an assumption that if they requested furniture 3 years ago and it got cut, requested it 2 years ago and it got cut, at some point, if we didn't get it, we would have definitely heard by now, or they rearranged how the room works, or it got purchased with ESSER funds, but I have to make the assumption that anything that was requested multiple years ago, somehow that's been covered at some point, or it's in this year's budget.
It's in this year.
Yeah, a lot of it's in this year's budget.
How is it inventory? Like,
Yeah.
I just, for me personally, for my own classroom, every year I have to go through and I have a spreadsheet of everything that's in there, and we have to asterisk, like, this is coming up, like, these need to be replaced, like my desks. Like, how is it accounted for and tracked?
We have a fixed asset program, but we don't track the individual pieces in the classroom. We have it as a classroom set of furniture, and what we purchased it as, the principals may have their own, you know, list of what's in what classroom and, you know, how many desks are needed.
Yeah, I just know when we turn ours in for our budget purposes, that it's highlighted, like, now my admin knows, you know, Jill's classroom needs desks in the next 3 years, or whatever it may be. So I'm just wondering how we're tracking.
I don't think we are.
Yeah, we
Or
don't
get-
get down to that detail, asking staff to basically assess their classroom each year, provide that spreadsheet we're talking about. We don't do that.
I guess, and I trust the principals, so when I say this, like, don't take offense, Ben, but I'm like, or do, I don't know. But I'm assuming that if a principal's requesting something, they've gone to other rooms to make sure there's not their desks hanging around. Like, I don't know how to say that without it sounding awful, but if we don't have an inventory, like, I don't know how that works, Michael, I guess is what I'm asking.
Furniture definitely crosses buildings.
Yeah.
Right, that's,
So,
okay,
yes.
that's what I'm trying to get at, like,
Absolutely.
because I'm just speaking personally, but we can justify every single thing in this budget, and so, otherwise I doubt you would have brought it forward, but then we would have to have an appetite for advocating for a 7% increase, so at some point, when we have these discussions, we may have to make decisions that aren't popular, so we have to go with what those would be, and I don't know the answer to that, I'm just saying. I mean, I guess to your point, which is why it probably gets cut, is because we try to figure something out, so I don't know the answer, I just.
It just gets tough when it gets cut year after year. Like, I was sitting in the
I
high school
know.
cafeteria last
Yeah.
week, and I was like, these tables are in terrible shape.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah, no.
yes,
I
but I
know.
mean, like, those are the things that get cut just because they're
No, I-
expensive, and they do need to be replaced.
Yeah, and I don't know how I would sell a 7% budget, but boy, it's frustrating year after year not to be able to, you know, Mr. Finch wants to do something in the entryway different, or wants to redo it, it's like, that makes sense, we should do that every 20 years, but we keep
Right.
saying we can't do things
Right,
because
no, I get it.
it feels
I-
extra, but.
I think it's at a certain point, like the furniture we keep putting up, it's gonna break. So it just depends on, is it gonna break this year,
don't
don't
disagree,
know.
I don't disagree, I'm just saying like,
I don't think anyone here disagrees with you, honestly.
yes.
The last, when we had the administrators, it sounded like some of these desks are cobbled together, like you said, filing cabinets, and I don't know if there's a way to just start triaging these sort of things, and, all right, if we're gonna buy some furniture and say the seniors all, or the senior classrooms get their new things, all right, let's pick the best of these things and roll it down and start dumpstering, I mean,
That's what we
some
do.
of it, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get the warm fuzzies where he's making it sound like these things are held together by bubble gum and good intentions, like, you know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta. Yeah.
We need like a tiered
That's all, that's my thought on that.
I feel like they have something, cause I seem to remember some teachers talking about recording this stuff, but I have no further information about that. So I think there might be something.
Maybe.
For some
I-
teachers, like maybe some do it and not everyone does. But I don't know.
And I know on Mondays, the state surplus White Farm is open to the public, and I go there an awful lot, and I didn't know if there's a way that you can put an outstanding request, hey, if Bedford turns in desks, they're still really good and usable, can we have right of first refusal, or something like that, and just put a note in, hey, you know, as other school districts do this stuff too, maybe we're not buying, you know, the top shelf thing, but if it's better than what you have, and it might be a third of the cost of something new, I don't know if anyone's ever reached out to White Farm, if they even do that.
Yeah, we used to go to White Farm, and then a lot of the facilities directors will email, or business administrators will email others saying, oh, we've got some furniture available, and a lot of times when you look at it,
It's a reason it's at the White
yeah,
Farm.
yeah.
Right,
Right.
which is understandable too, because I've seen that sort of stuff at the
Same
White
thing
Farm
here.
too, because.
Oh, they're just
you know,
shutting down a whole school.
But I didn't know if,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, if those sort of things, those come up.
So I have a question on the trust funds. There's 27, almost 28,000 in land. Is that setting something aside, or can that be rolled into, as we're talking about this shaking things out, furniture, things like that? Could that become a different purpose?
So land is not an expendable trust fund, it is a, just a regular trust fund, and the board cannot just roll it into anything else. The only thing that could be done with land is if the board decided that they wanted to present a warrant to dissolve that trust fund, and then that money goes back to, as revenue. So you can't just change the purpose of a land trust fund.
The land, okay.
What is the purpose of that trust fund?
Many years ago, it was believed that we were gonna have a second elementary school in Belmont. So they had started a trust fund, and put money aside with the belief that they were gonna have to buy land and build a second elementary school.
Is there a reason not to do a warrant if it's not needed?
It's up to the board.
Yeah.
They just never knew what was gonna happen. We had hoped at some point land might become available for athletic fields, you know, and we would have the funds there for that. That's up to the board.
I just think if it's just sitting there and not getting used, the actual monetary value of it is just decreasing, right? I mean, it would be best if you could use it
Yeah.
towards something that's really needed.
Which in this case would be going back to the taxpayers.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Right, that's where it would go.
But.
No, best case, you get to use it on something else, worst case, her point, it's just evaluating.
Right.
Yeah. All this discussion, Debbie pointed me to the CIP sheet, so looking ahead to next year's budget discussion, there's a $482,000 line item in there.
Yes.
Are you guys comfortable with that hitting in 1 year?
That's why we've been asking for additional funds in the expendable trust fund for the buildings and grounds.
Okay.
To handle that. The problem is the type of project it is really needs to be done as one
No, I
piece.
get that.
Yeah, so we've been trying to build up the
So
trust
it's,
fund.
the trust fund's being built up to cover that cost, or,
Yes.
okay?
Yep.
I missed that point.
Yeah, we used to put 100,000 in a year, and we requested 150 last year, and then we're asking for the 150 in this year, plus the funds that we currently have in there.
And then on that size of a number, how rigorous is the competitive bidding on that? Will the board get into looking at, that's a good sized number, so I just.
Oh, yeah, we have to
Yeah.
go out to competitive bid.
Well, I'm sure you do,
Yeah.
I just don't know if the board really gets
You
into
put a
that
high
enough.
number in there, so
Yeah.
you'd rather have enough than not enough.
Yeah, the Buildings and Grounds Committee will help, make sure that, you know, they'll review the bid specs, and then they review the bids that come in.
And then you would make a recommendation.
And then the Buildings and Grounds makes a recommendation to the board.
So let me say something that might not be particularly pleasing to some people. Does the board look at who the bidders were and circumstances around it, okay? I'll just be really blunt, if $500,000, if somebody's kind of working their deals on the bids, whatever's going on behind the scenes. You follow my gist on that? I'm not saying it
It's not bid
happens.
rigging,
Huh?
we get whoever bids on it, you have
Yeah.
3 bids, and we take the lowest bid.
Yeah, we put it in the paper, we put it in,
Put it on
construction
construction
summary, you know, we put it out there.
Okay,
You don't give anybody else other people's prices, because that's bid rigging, that's
Right.
wrong.
okay.
Right.
So the price is their price.
I
but
wasn't
we also look
directing
at
that
what-
to you, Jess, so please don't be insulted.
No, no, I'm not,
Yeah.
no, I totally
And-
understand the
yeah,
question.
Yeah, and one of
But,
the things that we have not done is we haven't, established a pre-bid list.
Mhm.
I know some districts will do that, but that's not something we've typically done.
Look at qualified bidders.
Right.
On the CIP for buildings and grounds, in 27-28, there's a BMS Able Road. Didn't we just build that?
Yes.
Yeah, we need to update that CIP as well.
Right.
Right, because that also has the cafeteria tables that was covered this year.
Yeah.
For next year.
Yeah.
We need to update both CIPs.
Those were not cheap.
No.
So Jeff, one other question. Again, on a $500,000 contract, whatever this ends up being,
Yeah.
is there any kind of terms that the board reviews in terms of deposits up front, monies withheld until the project is completed, et cetera, and some of the commercial stuff that will help try to clip change orders or claims later on that drives the price up?
Basically, well, Feb usually deals with whatever the contract comes in terms, but I mean, I believe you have to have a
before the
deadline, and if you don't get to that deadline, then there should be liquidated damages
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the contractor. And we'll talk about that with a project that size, but most of our projects haven't reached the scope of that.
No, I agree, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and we would definitely, you know, they'd have to have a
Yeah.
performance bond, and we
Right,
would have the
exactly,
attorneys review the
yeah.
contracts.
So does that come to the board to kind of understand those commercial terms and risk management, or is that made a
Usually-
decision, it's just a line item in the budget that, yes or no?
It would be a line item in the budget at that point. The Buildings and Grounds Committee would be probably involved with all of the bidding information. But certainly the board would have to approve the final contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just not, I don't know if the board's dealt with numbers that big before to say, hey, there's some certain things we just want to understand on this particular contract before it's signed. Okay.
Yeah, well, I kind of, in the private sector, is kind of what I do.
Yeah, okay.
So I know you, like, when they say, like, I don't want to use any particular, say, like, B paving, I don't know if there is a B paving, but I'll use an example, say, they come and say, yeah, we can do this project for $400,000.
Mhm.
And the way I would hope we handle it is, okay, you can do 400,000, lock in your price, and you can't change, if your material goes up, that's on you, like.
Right. Yeah, those are the kind of terms I'm.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, we lock in the price, so
Yeah.
they're not gonna be like, oh, sorry, you know, we were supposed to show up July 1st, we showed up August 1st, and all of a sudden asphalt went up, like, you know, I'm using obscene numbers, but like, you know, $10 a ton or something.
Right.
That's not our problem, that's yours, you've
Right.
signed the contract, this is what we're obligated for. I'm not a big fan of people coming to, I mean, unforeseen things can happen, but I'm not a fan of change orders. If you give me a price, that's the price.
Yeah, the last
Make it
time we
happen.
used changed orders was when we built a school building.
Yeah.
We
Yeah, well,
don't
that's-
usually have change orders for other contracts.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that's not necessary. Like, say, I'll use the high school, because that's what we're talking about. If they get into that catch basin, no one knows how deep the catch basin is. They get into it, and all of a sudden you have the materials fall in the hole. Now, the contractors come to you, be like, I have to put in shoring to get to the bottom of that hole. That's gonna be an additional cost, which could be 15, 16 grand.
Is
that wasn't part of the original.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So,
It's like you do a kitchen remodel and you find out that your floors are rotted.
yeah,
Oops,
That's
surprise.
exactly
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, we just haven't had any projects that required
Yeah,
that yet.
we haven't run
Just
across that
was
yet.
heavily involved in the repaving of the runways at Manchester Airport to the tune of $20 million. I can tell you all about
Change
big
orders.
numbers and
Oh,
change
yeah.
orders
Oh, I know.
and pavement
I know some of
and
the
quality
contractors that worked on
metrics.
that too. Yeah.
Oh, the pike guys or?
Pike, Sweat,
Yeah.
yeah, know all those boys.
So any other questions from Michael and Debbie, because the 28th will be diving in to look at what we want.
I have a question about something specific, but I can ask it after, because it's just, I don't know where to find it in the budget.
Could you remind me, the fitness room, that's only available to the students, what, during like the 7 to 3 kind of block, right? You don't get to use it before or after?
It's only available if there's an adult in the room with you supervising you.
Oh, it doesn't have to be a qualified person, it just has to be
It has to
an
be just
adult.
an adult in the building, like in works at the building. Like you can't just have your parent come in, but and they
Right.
don't have to be like certified.
I feel like it's a lot of money, and I know the upgrades are probably needed, but it's just like if only it was available in those pre and post hours, I feel like it would be much easier, not easier,
Well,
but
I think the
more justified
goal is,
itself.
once the equipment is usable again, then the goal would be to expand its use. Right now, we can't use it at all,
Just can't use
because
it,
it's
yeah.
all broken.
And my concern was the opposite, that it wasn't gonna be available pre and post school, that it would only be available during the school day, and if a kid doesn't have a
Yeah,
athletics
that's my
training class or
my
something,
concern as well.
then when are they gonna get to use it?
Right.
So, I agree, it's a big sum of money, and I'd be frustrated if kids couldn't get in there after school, you know, they've got an hour and a half before their practice, that starts at 4, they should be able to hang out there and lift before practice.
Is that something like the athletic trainer could hang out there unless there's like an injury on the field that they would have to respond to, or is that then you're trying to split that resource too much, cause then
That
that.
has happened in the past.
Yeah, so my thoughts, sort of the vision of that room particularly is, yeah, it can be utilized for, you know, workouts, but more specifically, it can be used as a training facility that is guided by the athletic trainer, particularly for prevention and recovery of injury. So it's sort of like a dual-fold kind of application there.
Okay, and you'll bring us more information on the 28th. And the 28th is here.
Yes. No,
Because they're broken, and she's been trying to get new doors for like years and years.
Well,
'Cause they're-
let's look into that.
And we had our Alice discussion today, so that's why.
I'll bring the fund
Oh,
function
yeah,
list.
yeah.
Okay.
The other thing I'll bring on the 28th is the fund function list, which explains what the functions are for and what the objects.
Our new lock system that we have doesn't work until the doors get. Right, 'cause the doors have.
Okay, you guys are good to go unless you want to stay. Okay. I was like, I came off the board for a reason.
You're my ride home, so I guess I'm here if you're here.
Okay. That would be on the horizon, you said for the 28th you wanted,
Let's see. So I think we should add budget development to the 28th. I also need to bring, there's a
No, all things
new
wrong, huh?
regional agreement for the Hewitt Center. That's to come to the board. There's a change in the law, specifically around regional agreements. So we had to, the Regional Advisory Board, really create a new draft of our current regional agreement, and there's a timeline attached to that, a deadline, I should say. So I'll have that draft, and we're approaching it in the region as a first reading, so that the board has a chance to, all the boards of the seven sending districts into the Hewitt have a chance to look at it, and feedback will then be taken, and then ultimately vote on the final draft. What you would be doing is voting to authorize Michelle to sign the agreement as the chair. So you'll see that on the 28th. There's not a lot of major changes. It's actually simplifying the agreement that we currently have in place. So you'll see that. And we also need to talk about the replacement of the kitchen equipment. Because we had a steamer that went, what else, Debbie?
Boiler.
And the boiler. So we might need to use retained fund balance in order to retain earnings in order to purchase those pieces of equipment.
And the snowplow bids.
And the snowplow bids.
Boy, that again.
Yep.
Nice.
Can I ask what's in the technology report?
There will not be a technology report that was provided by the IT director. Currently vacant.
No. We have co-IT directors.
Correct.
Yeah.
No.
Debbie.
We'll
Not
talk
enough.
about the side, we'll talk about the high school lab.
Not enough to put a report together, let's
Okay,
say.
I'm just saying,
Okay.
we technically have
Yes.
co-IT directors.
You won't see a
Tweedledee
report.
and Tweedledum.
Okay.
All right, so budget. All right, Michael, next up is enrollment report.
Yep, so this is your November 1st enrollment report. You can see that current district total is 1,127. That's 4 fewer students in October.
Okay. And volunteer list.
Motion to accept the volunteer list with an order to accept the author exceptions.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Okay, policy. I know I'm chair of policy, but given that I missed the meeting, Alice?
Yeah,
Or-
sure.
I didn't.
For this first one, Michael, I think we were taking out these sections in 14 through 17, lines 14 through 17, because
We don't have rules and procedures, and it's dictated by what we have to report to the state every year. So basically, we follow the guidelines that we're required to follow by the state.
So there is no rules and procedures for EBBD right
No.
now? Oh,
And then did we add the water quality and access?
Yes, we did.
So we
That was-
added that section in.
Because there was a change in the law, well, there was a new law that was developed, particularly around water quality and access. That's why we've been doing the lead testing over the past several years, so we wanted to add that in there.
So this is first reading, so does anyone have any concerns or questions or things we may need to address?
So occasionally we do get the report when they have found something in the water. Does that go out, if it's tested and nothing is found, does that also go out?
That we only know what has,
Okay.
what we need to mitigate.
So this is just for lead in the water, not other things?
More importantly, the law is specific to the lead in the water. However, we also, so we're on town water, so the town also has a responsibility for what water is coming into the schools.
Canterbury's different because they're well,
Canterbury's
and we would have to,
Canterbury's well.
we have
Yeah.
to send out anything there.
Okay, next one?
The next one, you missed a lively discussion, Michelle. Michelle, this one was fun. So the updates here, we, the New Hampshire School Board Association has actually changed their policy significantly. And if you scroll down to the bottom 2 pages of this particular policy, the New Hampshire School Board Association suggested simply the bolded items as that policy. And it was originally presented just to completely have this policy disappear. Mark and I, during that meeting, felt that, you know, having those definitions and everything were important, particularly given the climate of the world right now. So we decided to keep these definitions and some of the other items included there, and simply add the New Hampshire School Board Association verbiage to the end of the policy.
Is this a policy that, assuming the board approves at the next meeting, would be shared with parents? Like, because it's a hot topic, and anytime there's even a hoax or whatever, it comes up, I'm always afraid we have all these policies out there and nobody knows they exist. But this is one that parents should know about.
I think it's a good point, Sean. I think that I could include it, hopefully I don't have to, in a message that goes out to parents, like, you know, working within policy that we currently have. If there was a false threat or a bomb threat or something like that, we could refer to the policy.
Could we send it out in the future with, or refer to it when they send communications regarding ALMA drills? You know, a reference to
Alice.
Alice, thank you. Thank you. We talked about ALMA, sort of with that. You know, as always our.
Or maybe a link to the policy in those Alice drill emails.
We could, yeah.
I will say, the weird thing, and I realize I didn't come to the meeting or read the policy before I did this weekend. The whole beginning portion is all about bombs. And then I'm just struggling because it's all bombs.
Would you like them to add a section on active shooters?
No, I mean, I guess it's covered, but and I agree, I think it's good to keep the definitions, but we actually never define, I don't know what you would say with active shooter, it seems pretty clear what active shooter means. Then again, I would also say it makes sense to know what bomb means, but, so I guess I don't have because the title, first of all, the titles don't match here, so this says
We
bomb,
changed
active
the-
shooter, and
the
other
title.
such threats, but this says false alarm, bomb, active shooter.
Could you just add above line 18 to say active shooters and other false threats, then underline it? Would that be sufficient?
Well, are we talking about false threats? Cause this says false threats, but the top doesn't.
So,
Such
Michael,
threats,
keep
sorry.
me honest here, I think we decided that false alarms fell into other such threats.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
So, you know, on page 3 of 4, line 18 and 19, we did add wording in there, because this wasn't in the School Board Association wording, active shooter or other such violent threats to include false alarms are significant to concern the school. So we didn't put false alarms in it because we consider them other threats, other such
So
threats.
I don't have a problem, but on our agenda, it says false alarms. I'm sorry I wasn't clear. Our agenda says the policy name
Oh,
is
okay.
false alarms,
Yeah,
bombs, blah, blah, blah.
That's a mistake.
So that, I should have explained myself further.
Is
But
it title of ours the same as the School Boards Association?
So the School Boards Association is, they're eliminating the policy that spoke specifically to bombs and bomb threats and combining all the threats in EBCC. And it did have false alarms in their title, but in our conversation, we didn't feel that we needed to put false alarms in there because it's part of, they're considered other such threats. That's why we added that wording on page 3 on line 18 and 19. Because it does fall in the category of other such threats.
I just think it's odd that we are very specific about what we do for bombs, but not what we do for active shooters.
So I think if you just change it so that there's just like an underlying active shooters and other such threats, then it all lines up.
Okay.
I get what you're saying though. It looks like a policy that was created as a bomb policy that
That's
we
because
threw.
it was.
other
Right.
threats in.
Right.
That's how it reads.
Because it's like bombs, bomb threats.
Right.
And then we talk about what we do when
Just
it's
chalk
all
it.
about bombs. And then even reentry, making of a bomb is a crime. And then 18 through
Is the combined language.
is the combined language. It's just.
So that's what we talked, I mean, we talked about this in great detail. My original proposal that came into the policy committee was to strike through all of the bond language and use the new wording, because that's what the School Board Association did. It eliminated all those definitions and so forth. The committee didn't feel that they wanted to get rid of those, the details of the bomb threats.
And I'm not sure if I remember this correctly, but was the original, I'm sure there were alterations made at some point to the policy before we made these suggested changes. Was that the School Board Association's policy previously?
That I don't know.
Okay.
What's the
I
question?
would assume so.
I wanted to know if the School Boards Association had all of the definitions and everything, and if that's where we pulled them from, when we pulled them into our policy.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could say is from way back, we didn't, as a district, typically follow the School Boards Association policy. Like, we do that a lot more now than we used to. That's been my recollection.
I've not been on the policy committee that long, but that is not my experience currently.
Yeah. I would say that from the wording that's in our current policy, that's coming from the School Boards Association. I would find it very difficult for our policy committee to come up with that amount of wording or
Right,
involved.
with those
Right, I just think we need to, I like Randy's suggestion, like, even the lines 4 to 7, it's all about bombs.
So you could
And
update.
bomb threats, there's no mention of active shooters or other things. So I'm like, okay, so apparently we're only protecting bomb and bomb threats at the beginning, and then when you scroll down, it's, so we could just widen the language in the beginning.
To state, basically on line 6, you could strike through by bomb threats and bombs and say physical
Right.
harm which may be caused by bomb, active shooter, and other such threats.
Right, that's what,
Right.
I think that was what Randy was suggesting.
It just feels very dated because bombs were very much, and still could very potentially harmful.
Right.
But our current climate is much more focused towards active shooters, unfortunately. It feels like that should be just as much of a focus in this.
Why didn't we split it out and make them two? It would be like EBCC-A.
I'm opposed to that. I didn't think of it.
Cause it does look like two combined into one.
Right.
And then we have this whole thing about, it's just,
So, that's not a bad suggestion, so you have bombs and bomb threats, just keep that current policy in
Right.
place. And then create like EBCD maybe, I don't know if we have EBCD, but the sequence. But we're always always, we've
I
been
don't
trying to
want more
avoid
policies.
adding new policies.
I don't want more policies, just devices and threats. Like, it doesn't have to be a bomb, it could be, I mean, I don't know, just, personally, I just think it should be scrapped and started over. I don't think we need two separate policies. It's basically addressing the same.
Well, could we strike 25 through, we changed pages, through re-entry, and then start on page 3 with the the School Boards Association language? We go into a lot of detail about the re-entry related to bombs and what happens, like, or maybe we should toss this, I don't know,
Is it a possibility to send it back to the policy committee and just, we can
Sure.
try again?
Table it.
Table it. Do we need a motion to table it?
Just a quick
This
question
is
though.
informational.
Yeah, we can just.
The re-entry section, is that just
That's for bombs.
page 3, lines 6 to 9? Because everything below it isn't about re-entry.
Correct.
So after line 16, that's all in new language.
Yeah, but he's saying.
No, but I'm even
it's
saying
only-
lines 11 is, making a bomb threat is
It's
a
a
crime.
crime.
Nothing to do with re-entry. Like, I don't know, it just
So
doesn't flow at all.
let's table it and we'll
We'll
have
send
to.
it back to committee.
Yeah.
It's disjointed at best.
Okay,
Sounds good.
all right, next one, EEAA.
Video. With this one, the suggested change was the bolded information on line number 46. Only if students other than their own are not present in the video, that, we all agreed that parents should not be receiving video footage if there are students other than their own in them. These stricken through lines 26 through 29 is actually because there is a, inaccuracy in record retention, or it contradicts itself. So lines 26 through 29 talk about record retention and the superintendent being able to consult with necessary personnel to determine how records are deleted, and that's actually not in line with the actual state laws. So, on page 2, the Shaker Regional School District shall comply with all applicable state and federal laws related to record maintenance, record retention, and privacy, so we struck through those lines.
I like the part where it says we retain copies until they are erased.
Well, okay, any other questions about that? Okay, school bus safety.
So this was a simple change, we just got rid of, we struck through it and defined the carrier. I should say added the carrier.
Just to make it clearer.
I didn't know what it was.
Oh.
I'm not sure you had to bring it to the board, but I appreciate it.
Wanted you all
Any
to
new
know.
wording
Yeah.
you wanna bring?
Okay. All right, there's Appendix B nominations. That can be done in public if there's nothing of a personnel nature.
So I know, Sean, you asked at our last meeting where we are with the winter sports coaches, and those positions are filled, other than girls 7-8 basketball at the middle school.
Motion to accept Appendix B nominations as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, okay, motion carries. Right. We have superintendent evaluation. Huh? I thought we had moved this agenda item, to next meeting, but I'm happy to go into non-public to talk about it.
We talked about as to whether the board wants to move it to the next meeting or not, depending on what time of night it was.
Right.
I was worried looking at the agenda and
Right.
budget piece that we'd be here late.
Right.
We would put it on here, but we would also have the option to table it if we felt like tabling it.
So we can go into non-public and talk
Now
about
she's
it.
yawning, so.
Yeah, she yawns.
But that's, just ignore that, I yawn all day, it could be 10 in
I thought you
the
were sending
morning,
a
I
message.
yawn. Huh?
I thought you were sending a message.
No, I
Oh,
wasn't.
she didn't.
I'm happy to, so, we can entertain a motion